From Atlanta, Georgia, welcome to Fearfully and Wonderfully Me, a podcast for women on leadership and life skills with Rhea Story. Rhea shares powerful life and leadership principles, helping you maximize your potential and become the woman God created you to be.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Fearfully and Wonderfully Me. Today's episode is on a chapter from my book, Leadership Gems, Being Resilient. And you know me, if you know my story, then resilience is one of those traits that I've had to learn kind of the hard way. And I think most women have learned to be resilient if they are successful in life, because life is full of adversity. And we talked about in our last episode being positive in the face of adversity. But resilience is more than just being positive. It's learning to spring back after being knocked down. Resilience is learning to not just survive, but to thrive. Resilience is growing, and being that thriver, even when there's adversity, because there will be adversity in life at some point. So, and I talked about this chapter in the book, being resilient. It's one of the key traits for leaders, because resilience is one of those qualities that we most admire in other women and we most expect in our leaders. Being resilient as women, as leaders, helps us increase our influence, because we look to our leaders in life, whether it's formally at work or just the leaders. It could be the leaders in the church, or it could be leaders in your community. Mac and I spent many years living in Lee County, Alabama. And, it's been 3 or 4 years since we've moved away from there now, but they just had a couple of weeks ago just a terrible, terrible tornado, and many people were killed. And in fact, it was one of the worst tornadoes in terms of people who were killed in recent years, in many years. And, it's interesting that community has suffered such a loss, but they've been able to draw together. And I've seen a lot of great positive stories about people helping one another out, and the community has really come together. And I saw where one organization donated all the money for the victims' funerals, so that the families wouldn't have to bear that expense. And I've seen so many positive stories where the community really as a whole felt such a tragedy and such a loss, but they're not just surviving, they're thriving. They're pulling together and building one another up through that season of adversity, and they're saying we're going to rebuild stronger. The hashtag is that's been I saw on a couple of social media posts, Beauregard Strong. And so really, I think it's a great example of resilience. It's not just surviving day to day, but thriving and lifting back up. It's resilience is going through the ashes and then burning brighter and becoming more brilliant because of the flames that you've experienced. And we look to the leaders at home, at work, at church, and our community. We look to the leaders to be resilient, to not just bounce back, but to help others bounce back, because that's one of our roles as a leader, particularly as a woman, where we have to be resilient for our families. We have to be resilient for the people around us, whether it's at work, at home. Maybe it's just being resilient, in your own thinking. We talked a lot about positive thinking in last episode. Now, followers look to leaders to be strong and help them overcome problems. So when you choose to be resilient, you increase your influence with those who are following you, who are influenced by you. And you may increase your influence with someone who isn't yet following, but is watching to see what kind of person you are. I talk to many women who've been through adversity of all kinds because I share my story of growing up as an abuse victim and, leaving home at 19. I didn't have much. I had a couple of I had a duffel bag and a couple of pillowcases with some clothes and I didn't have a job. I didn't have a high school diploma. I'd never been to school. And, I share my story in many places when Mac and I speak. And it's not surprising to me anymore how many people, men and women, have experienced something similar. Maybe not my story isn't their story exactly, but many women or men come up with the story of me too. And, I talk to so many people who've been through other kinds of adversity, illness or disease or death of a loved one, abuse, loss of a job, um, loss of security in life, loss of faith sometimes. And what I find impressive is how resilient some people are. Rick Warren wrote Purpose Driven Life, and he says we are products of our past, but we don't have to be prisoners of it. And I love that because, I call it our resilience factor. What determines how quickly we rise to resilience is our resilience factor, our ability to move beyond just surviving to thriving. And the greater our resilience factor, the greater our ability to overcome what happens to us in life. How quickly do we bounce back? Um, and that's really that shift in saying not just survive, but learning to thrive after adversity. Edith Eger she wrote a really great book called The Choice, and um, she says that our quote, our painful experiences aren't a liability, they're a gift. They give us perspective and meaning, an opportunity to find our unique purpose and our strength. So think about that. And what's interesting about Edith Eger, she was a prisoner in World War II concentration camp, and she's got a powerful story in and of itself. But what's interesting is that after she only barely survived. She very nearly died. And after the war was over, she eventually immigrated to the United States, and she went on to become a psychologist. And she's used her experiences to fuel her passion for helping others. And, if she has that perspective, our painful experiences aren't a liability, they're a gift. And wow, how impressive it is that someone who's gone through, being tortured and being starved and losing family members and she can look back and say painful experiences aren't a liability, they're a gift because they give us perspective and meaning. And I tell you that's resilience right there, and learning to look at painful experiences, um, and say this is a gift in some way because it gives me perspective and meaning and an opportunity to find my strength and purpose. Um, so, and I know that that's a challenge. I know that not every day is going to go great. And some days it's easier to be resilient. And some days it's not. Some days, you may not want to feel like getting out of bed in the morning. But when you do, you are the example of saying what I'm not a prisoner of the past. I love to say, yesterday should not hold tomorrow hostage. Because a lot of times I think when we go through something and something painful or something bad, something negative, it's so easy to let that color our future in a negative way, in a negative light. But what happens to us in the past isn't as important as who we become because of it. Absolutely, adversity affects us, but how it affects us is up to us. Really great quote by Eric, I hope I'm saying this last name right, Agreetens. And he says, one mark of resilience is learning to tell which pain deserves our attention. paying attention to every pain all the time doesn't lead to resilience. It just leads to whining. And it's so true, because we're gonna have great days and not so great days, and when we pay attention to every pain all the time, it just leads us to start whining rather than bouncing back and thriving. Viktor Frankl, I'm a big fan of Viktor Frankl's work. He also was a concentration camp survivor, and he wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. And he says, I can see beyond the misery of a situation to the potential for discovering a meaning behind it, and thus turn an apparently meaningless suffering into genuine human achievement. I'm convinced, in the final analysis, there is no situation that does not contain within it a seed of meaning. So much like Edith Eger, he's really focusing on the meaning and the perspective and the purpose for adversity in life. Now, when I talk about adversity, certainly we experience a wide range of adversity. There might be the flat tire when you're not expecting and you leave and you're in a hurry to get somewhere, maybe to an appointment, and you walk out and your tire has your tire's flat. And certainly we could consider that adversity. It's something that interferes with us, and how we respond to that is important just as much as how we respond to the big problems in life, because we're going to face them. Big problems, small problems, it's just a fact. So there's a wide range of experiences that we can consider adverse experiences. But typically we find resilience is that characteristic that if we're able to carry it with us, not just in the big things, but in the small things. Those small bumps in the road are an opportunity to practice and build our strength for being resilient for when we hit the big roadblocks or the big detours in life. So think about that. It's not just resilience in the big situations and big problems, but being resilient and thriving with the little bumps in the road that we weren't expecting, the little problems. Jack Hayford said, "We can't gain any momentum moving toward tomorrow if we're dragging the past behind us." And Truett Cathy of Chick-fil-A said, "Not even God can change the past, but he can do a lot of wonderful things about the future if we let him." So as you think about resilience, start embracing that, that building that resilience factor and saying, I've got to just find the meaning and the purpose in this. A last quote to leave you with, Fred Smith said, "A fact of life is something you cannot control or fix. A problem is something you can fix." And so resilience is learning to focus on what we can fix, the problems that we can control. And I talk about that a lot, but it's so powerful. Learning to look at painful experiences in life and find the meaning, find them positive. But not just surviving, learning to live again. Resilience is the difference between I didn't die when I survived something, and I learned to live again. That's resilience. Until next time.
Start increasing your influence and maximizing your potential with Ria's audiobooks. Available at audible.com, amazon.com, and iBooks. Please visit riastory.com to learn about Ria's books, resources, speaking, and training programs. Thanks for listening.